A 6-year-old girl appeared alone at the entrance of a luxury skyscraper in Manhattan, clutching a crumpled envelope in her dirty hands. The security guards tried to turn her away, but she insisted, "I need to give this to Mr. Harrison. It's important." When finally the billionaire himself came down to see what the fuss was about, she simply held out the paper and said, "It's about my mom and you." Seconds after opening the envelope and reading the DNA test, he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The sun set over the metropolis, painting the sky in hues of orange that contrasted with the lengthening shadows of the skyscrapers. At the top of the most imposing one, the millionaire watched the city through the glass walls of his office. His empire stretched across the horizon, buildings, companies, investments, all built with relentless ambition and calculated decisions. But his eyes, though fixed on the landscape, saw nothing but the emptiness that consumed him from within. He checked the platinum Rolex on his wrist, a gift he had given himself when he closed his first big deal, and sighed. Another lonely night awaited him. His footsteps echoed on the marble floor as he walked to his mahogany desk, piled high, with contracts and reports demanding his attention. There were no photos, no memories, just the empire he had built on the foundation of his emotional sacrifices. Miles away, in a vacant lot surrounded by makeshift shacks, the girl prepared to sleep in her cardboard box. The hard-packed dirt was her bed, a threadbare blanket, her cover. With large, expressive eyes that never shed tears, she arranged her 3 treasures inside the plastic bag. A worn teddy bear, a photograph where a woman smiled amidst a distant happiness, and a crumpled envelope containing papers she did not understand. Neighbors called her the girl who doesn't cry. Even when her mother passed away, a victim of pneumonia that could have been treated if they had money, she didn't shed a single tear. The adults whispered, worried about the child who seemed to carry the weight of the world on her fragile shoulders. But no one knew that the tears had dried long before, when the little girl understood that crying wouldn't change her reality. Her mother's last words echoed in her mind like a mantra. "He has to know." The woman, consumed by fever, held her small hands with the little strength she had left and handed her the envelope, whispering a name and an address, a name that the girl repeated every night before going to sleep, like a prayer. An address she had memorized, word for word, number for number. In the luxurious penthouse, the millionaire unbuttoned his impeccable suit jacket, feeling the weight of another day dedicated to expanding his empire. That night, as on so many others, he had an expensive bourbon while flipping through documents. Occasionally, his gaze wandered to the illuminated city outside, a city full of people, stories, and connections from which he remained distant. An old photograph, hidden in the locked drawer of his desk, was his only link to a different life he could have had. A woman smiled in it, with eyes that overflowed with life and love. The same woman he had abandoned years ago when he had to choose between his heart and his ambition, a choice that haunted him every night when the silence of the penthouse became deafening. The girl fell asleep clutching her teddy bear, the envelope safe under her makeshift pillow. Tomorrow would be the day. After weeks of studying the route, watching the immense building from afar, gathering the courage to face the men in suits who guarded the entrance, she would finally deliver the message. She didn't know what would happen next, but she would fulfill the promise she made to her mother. The millionaire and the girl, separated by completely distinct worlds, shared the same insomnia that night, the same emptiness, the same restlessness, unaware that, in less than 24 hours, their lives would collide in an irreversible way. The morning dawned cold over the city. The girl woke up with the first rays of sun that penetrated through the cracks in her makeshift shelter. With careful movements, she put her treasures in the faded plastic bag. Her small hands trembled, not from cold, but from determination. Today, would be the day. She walked through busy streets, invisible to the hurried eyes of the adults. Her worn clothes and torn shoes contrasted with the gleaming storefronts and the luxurious cars. She followed the path she had memorized, crossing avenues, counting blocks. The envelope safe against her chest, protected as if she were guarding the most valuable of secrets, and she was. In the penthouse of the skyscraper, the millionaire faced another morning of ruthless decisions. After a conference call where he closed the purchase of a competing company, laying off hundreds of employees with the coldness of someone signing a check, he prepared for a meeting with international investors. His assistant rushed in, bringing urgent documents that required his signature. "We need the response by noon," the assistant informed him, avoiding prolonged eye contact with the man everyone feared to contradict. "Consider it done," the millionaire replied, with that monotone voice that revealed absolutely nothing of what was going on behind the impeccable facade. Down below, on the polished sidewalk in front of the skyscraper, the girl finally arrived. Her eyes rose, trying to reach the top of the building that seemed to touch the clouds. She swallowed hard, squeezing the envelope tighter. Her small heart beat fast against the ribs that were visible under her thin blouse. The security guards stationed at the entrance noticed her immediately. One of them, the taller one, approached with purposeful strides, his stern expression controlling the territory. "Hey, kid, you can't stay here," he said, trying to sound gentle but firm. "This is private property." The girl didn't back down. She stared at the man with those eyes that had witnessed more pain than any child should know. "I need to give this to Mr. Harrison. It's important." The security guard exchanged glances with his colleague, both suppressing condescending smiles. Just another beggar trying to reach the inaccessible millionaire. "Look, it doesn't work that way. No one goes up without an appointment." "But it's important," she insisted, holding out the crumpled envelope. "My mom said he has to know." "Your mom should have taught you that there are proper channels for communication," the second security guard replied, approaching. "Come on, go home." "I don't have a home," she replied, with a sincerity that momentarily disarmed the men, "and I'm not leaving until I deliver this." In the lavish lobby, a receptionist watched the scene through the glass doors. Something about the child's determination moved her. While the security guards tried to persuade the girl to leave, she called Mr. Harrison's assistant. "There's a child at the entrance insisting on delivering something personally to him," she explained. "She seems different. Maybe we should call Child Protective Services." The assistant sighed, interrupting Mr. Harrison during his meeting to report the situation. To his surprise, the man stood up abruptly. "A child?" he asked, with an unusual intensity in his voice. "What does she want to deliver?" "An envelope, sir. The security guards are trying to turn her away, but she insists it's important." Mr. Harrison walked to the panoramic window, looking down. From his height, the people looked like ants. "Tell them I'm coming down." The assistant paled. "Sir, but what about the meeting?" "Postpone it," he ordered, already walking towards the elevator. Not even he understood that sudden impulse. Something about the situation had penetrated the armor he had built around himself. The security guards were stunned when they received the instruction. Mr. Harrison would come down personally. They exchanged bewildered glances while the girl remained impassive, as if she knew that was the only possible outcome. When the elevator doors opened and Mr. Harrison emerged into the lobby, all the employees froze. He never came down to receive visitors, especially not to meet a scruffy child on the sidewalk. The girl saw him even before he noticed her. She recognized him immediately from the torn photo she carried with her. Older, harsher, but unmistakable. When their eyes finally met, something invisible passed between them, a recognition that transcended rational understanding. For a fleeting moment, Mr. Harrison saw something familiar in those childish eyes, something that disturbed him deeply. "Are you the one who wants to give me something?" he asked, keeping his distance, his controlled voice revealing only a fraction of his inner turmoil. The girl took a step forward, holding out the envelope. "It's about my mom. And you." Time seemed to freeze in that moment. Mr. Harrison, a man accustomed to controlling every aspect of his existence, felt strangely vulnerable before this child. With slightly trembling fingers, he took the crumpled envelope. Something inside him already suspected what he would find there, a truth he had been trying to bury for years. He opened the envelope with calculated caution. Inside, an official paper with the lab's letterhead. His pupils dilated as he read the woman's name, the name he had banished from his lips, but never from his thoughts. His eyes scanned the numbers, the percentages, until they found the conclusion highlighted in bold. Genetic compatibility confirmed. Father and daughter. The world around him darkened. His legs lost their strength. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness were the girl's eyes, the same eyes as hers. He woke up minutes later in his private office on the ground floor, surrounded by worried assistants and a doctor from the corporate medical team checking his vital signs. He waved them all away with an impatient gesture. "Where's the girl?" he asked, his voice still weak. "In the waiting room, sir," the assistant replied, visibly uncomfortable. "With the security team." "What did that paper say?" The doctor looked at him with clinical concern. "Some disturbing news?" Mr. Harrison sat up, adjusting his tie with an automatic movement, the mask of control already returning to its place. "Nothing relevant. A pathetic attempt at extortion, I presume. A lie. The first of many he would tell in the following days, trying to deny what his body had already admitted at the moment of his fainting. "Should we call the police?" asked the head of security, his hand already on the phone. "No." The answer came quickly and firmly. "I'll handle this personally. Leave me alone with her." The employees exchanged confused glances, but no one dared to question. One by one, they left the room. When the girl entered, she seemed even smaller under the sophisticated lighting of the office. She showed no fascination with the luxury around her, only observed Mr. Harrison with that penetrating gaze that disconcerted him. "Who sent you here?" he snapped, choosing attack as a form of defense. "Was it one of my competitors? Some journalist? Looking for a scandal?" The girl didn't answer immediately. She placed her plastic bag on the Persian carpet and took out the torn photograph. She held it out to him. "My mom always kept this." Mr. Harrison recognized the fragment of a photo that he himself had torn up years ago in a moment of fury against himself. The other half was probably still locked in his drawer, up there in the skyscraper. His younger face smiled beside hers in a time when money hadn't consumed his soul. "That doesn't prove anything," he said, returning the photo with slightly trembling hands. "This test could be forged." "She said you wouldn't believe it," the girl replied, with a wisdom that didn't belong to her age. "Said you always chose not to see." Those words hit him like a physical blow. They were the same ones she had told him on their last encounter, when he chose ambition over love. "You always choose not to see what really matters." "Where is your mother now?" he asked, trying to regain control of the situation. "Why didn't she come personally?" "She died." The simplicity of the answer, devoid of drama, had more impact than any accusation. "Pneumonia. Didn't have money for medicine." Mr. Harrison loosened his tie, suddenly suffocated. An image formed in his mind. Her, alone, sick, dying in some miserable place while he was signing million-dollar contracts. "And your father? I mean, the man who lived with you?" He desperately tried to find a way out, an alternative explanation. "I never had a father." The girl put the photo back in the bag. "Only Mom, and now not even her." The assistant entered after a brief knock on the door. "Sir, the Asian investors are waiting on the video conference." It's the billion-dollar deal. We've been negotiating for months. Mr. Harrison nodded automatically, divided between two worlds he never imagined would collide. Arrange a hotel for the girl. Food, clothes, everything she needs. I don't want a hotel, the little girl interrupted with surprising firmness. I want to know why you didn't want Mom. The question petrified him. His empire, his achievements, his wealth. Everything suddenly seemed insignificant before. Those eyes that demanded an answer he didn't know how to give. Take her, he ordered the assistant, looking away. Make sure she's comfortable. We'll figure this out later. As the child was led away, he was left alone with the crumpled DNA test in his hands. The truth printed in black and white, undeniable. A truth he would fight with all his might to deny in the following days. 3 days passed. Mr. Harrison plunged into a frenzy of work, signing contracts, attending endless meetings, anything to occupy his mind and avoid facing the truth that awaited him. The girl remained in the luxury hotel he had provided, under the supervision of an employee specially assigned to care for her. Reports about the child arrived punctually on his desk. She barely touched the fancy food that was served to her. She showed no enthusiasm for the expensive toys he had sent to buy. She spent hours looking out the window, clutching her old teddy bear. She didn't cry, didn't complain, just waited, with a patience that defied her age. On the third night, exhausted from running away, Mr. Harrison dismissed the driver and drove himself to the neighborhood where the girl said she lived with her mother. He needed to see for himself, confirm or deny the story. He parked the luxury car on a dangerous street, ignoring the curious and hostile looks of the locals. The vacant lot was exactly as she had described. Makeshift shacks, accumulated garbage, hopelessness in the air. Some children played barefoot in the dirt. Adults talked in low voices, distrustful of his presence. He approached cautiously, his fine suit completely out of place in that setting. I'm looking for information about a woman who used to live here, he said to a lady who was watching everything from her makeshift chair. She passed away recently. She had a little daughter. The elderly woman's eyes narrowed with recognition. The mother of the girl who doesn't cry, she murmured, making the sign of the cross. Poor thing. Worked until she couldn't anymore, got sick in the rain collecting cardboard to sell. Each word was a needle piercing his conscience. Mr. Harrison swallowed hard, maintaining the facade of indifference. Did she talk about the child's father? The woman shrugged, didn't talk about anyone. But before she died, she kept repeating a name in her fever and gave something to the girl to deliver, said it was important. Where did they live? The woman pointed to a space between two shacks, where cardboard boxes were piled up under a makeshift tarp. There, the little one kept everything tidy, organized like her mother. Mr. Harrison approached the indicated place. He knelt on the ground, ignoring the dirt that stained his Italian suit. The shelter was tiny. It barely fit one adult, let alone a woman and a child. Thin blankets, some carefully folded clothes, a broken hairbrush, a school notebook with meticulously completed exercises, the childish handwriting forming words with visible effort. Among the belongings, he found a shoebox. Inside, letters that were never sent, all addressed to him. With trembling hands, he opened the first one. The handwriting was unmistakable. I know you've chosen another path, but we need to talk. Something important has happened. The letter dated back 6 years, when she tried to tell him about the pregnancy. A letter that never reached him, blocked by zealous assistants who protected the boss from emotional inconveniences. He opened another, more recent. The girl asks about you. What should I say? That her father preferred money to meeting her. The last letter, written with the trembling handwriting of someone fighting against weakness, said only, I don't have much time left. She will be alone. You are all she has now. There, in the midst of that extreme poverty, kneeling on the ground, with letters scattered around him, Mr. Harrison allowed himself to remember the love he felt for her, the plans they made together before his ambition corroded everything. The ultimatum she had given him, either your money or us. And how he had chosen without hesitation the path of wealth, convinced that feelings were obstacles to success. A neighbor approached, watching him with curiosity. "Are you related to them?" The question hung in the air, laden with meanings. Was he a relative? Was he the father who never existed? Was he the man who abandoned, who ignored, who chose not to see? "I'm responsible," he finally replied, the words coming from somewhere beyond reason. When he returned to the car, he was unrecognizable, his suit dirty, his hair disheveled, the mask of indifference completely shattered. He drove to the hotel where the girl was staying, crossed the lobby ignoring the shocked looks of the employees, and knocked on the door of the suite. The employee answered, surprised by his appearance. "Mr. Harrison, is everything all right?" "Leave us," he ordered, his voice hoarse with contained emotion. The girl was sitting on the edge of the king-size bed, so small in the face of the room's opulence. She showed no surprise at seeing him in that state, as if she already knew that eventually he would arrive like that, disarmed by the truth. "You were there," she stated with that acute perception that disconcerted him. He nodded, unable to lie. "I found your mother's letters. She always wrote. She said that one day you would read them." Mr. Harrison sat down next to her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Why didn't your mother ever try to demand anything, ask for child support, assistance?" The girl looked at him as if the answer were obvious. She said, "She didn't want your money. She just wanted you to know." And at that moment, under the weight of those simple words, something inside him began to crumble. The following days brought a gradual transformation in Mr. Harrison's routine. Meetings were cancelled, projects postponed, contracts delegated. To the astonishment of the board of directors, he requested, for the first time in 15 years, a leave of absence for urgent personal reasons. The news spread through the corporate corridors like wildfire, the Iceman showing signs of humanity. The girl continued in the hotel, but now he spent hours with her daily. Awkward conversations, embarrassing silences, cautious approaches from two strangers connected by blood and separated by entire worlds. He, accustomed to billion-dollar negotiations, found himself completely unprepared to dialogue with a child. She, with wisdom beyond her age, seemed to understand his difficulty better than he did himself. "Did your mother talk about me?" he asked one afternoon while watching the city from the panoramic window. "Only good things," she replied, surprising him. "She said you were smart and hard-working, that one day you would realize that money isn't everything." The words hit him like sure arrows. Not in misery, not in illness, not on the verge of death had she condemned him. She continued to believe in his redemption. "Why don't you ever cry?" he asked, noting how the girl maintained her composure even in the most adverse circumstances. She shrugged, a gesture so adult on such a small frame. "Crying doesn't solve anything. Mum needed medicine, not tears." That night, Mr. Harrison couldn't sleep. Her words echoed in his mind. The plastic bag with the 3 objects, the teddy, Bear, the photo, and the test, now rested on his coffee table, a monument to the life he never knew, to the family he rejected before he even knew they existed. The next morning, he made a decision. He took the girl to see his penthouse. She observed everything with silent curiosity, touching expensive objects carefully, as if afraid of breaking or dirtying them. "You can live here," he offered, trying to sound casual. "There's plenty of room. I can hire tutors, private teachers, give you everything you need." The girl stared at him with those eyes that seemed to see into his soul. "Mum said we don't need much to be happy. Just people who care about us." And you don't think I would care about you for real? The question came out more vulnerable than he intended. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she walked to the huge window and pointed down. The people down there look like ants from up here. Yes, he agreed, not understanding the point. That's how you see everyone, she concluded with a disturbing clarity. Too small to matter. Mr. Harrison felt the truth of those words reverberating within him. For years, he had observed the world from the height of his skyscraper, reducing people to numbers, lives to statistics, feelings to obstacles. The phone rang, interrupting the moment. His assistant, with a tense voice, "Mr. Harrison, it's leaked. To the press. A tabloid published about the girl. They're speculating about paternity inheritance scandal. We need an official statement urgently." The news was expected, but it still caught him off guard. He hung up without answering and turned to the girl, who remained absorbed in her contemplation of the city. "Things are going to get complicated," he warned. "People will ask questions, invent stories, take pictures." She just nodded as if she already expected it. "Mom said the truth always comes out, even when we try to hide it." That same day, the board of directors called an emergency meeting. Mr. Harrison attended for the first time, accompanied. The girl, now dressed in new but simple clothes, she had refused the expensive dresses he had tried to buy, sat quietly in a corner of the imposing boardroom, observing everything with attentive eyes. "This is completely inappropriate," protested the CFO, indicating the child with a nod of his head. "We are discussing the future of the company. It's no place for—" "My daughter," interrupted Mr. Harrison, the words coming out naturally, surprising even himself. "She stays where I am." A stunned silence filled the room. Executives exchanged incredulous glances. The general counsel was the first to speak. "Sir, we must consider the repercussions. I advise an official DNA test before any public acknowledgement." "We already have the test," he replied, placing on the table the crumpled paper that the girl had given him days ago. "And we will do another if necessary, but the result will be the same." "We can manage this discreetly," suggested the Director of Public Relations. "Perhaps a financial settlement with the child's family, guarantees of education, all very private and—" "There is no family," cut in Mr. Harrison, his voice hardening. "The mother has passed away, and there will be no discretion. I will publicly acknowledge my daughter and assume all the responsibilities that this implies." The statement caused a stir. For years, those same executives had admired and feared the cold, calculating nature of this man. Now they confronted an emotional stranger, making decisions based not on spreadsheets, but on something they didn't understand. Remorse, guilt, maybe even love. At the end of the meeting, while the directors left with their heads down, worried about the impact on the company's stock, the girl approached her father and hesitantly took his hand. A simple gesture that sealed more than any document, the beginning of a new reality for both. The news exploded in the newspapers the next morning. Photographs of Mr. Harrison with the little girl were plastered on the front pages of all the tabloids. Rampant speculation, conspiracy theories, fabricated stories. The media eagerly plunged into what they considered the scandal of the year. "Tycoon discovers secret daughter, living in poverty," screamed the sensational headlines. Mr. Harrison's coverage was surrounded by paparazzi. Helicopters hovered over the building, trying to capture images through the windows. The company's legal department worked frantically to contain the media tsunami while stocks plummeted on Wall Street. Nervous investors demanded explanations. Business partners reconsidered alliances. In the midst of this chaos, the girl remained extraordinarily calm. She observed everything with attentive eyes, as if studying a curious but distant phenomenon. When Mr. Harrison tried to explain the situation to her, she simply nodded. "People like sad stories," she commented, with wisdom that didn't belong to her age. Mom said it's because they feel better about their own lives afterward. That observation left him momentarily speechless. How could a 6-year-old understand human nature so deeply? Meanwhile, a private investigation he had requested came back with surprising results. The report, delivered discreetly in a sealed envelope, contained information he never imagined he would find. "Are you sure you want to read this alone, sir?" asked the investigator, a man with decades of experience. "Some of the findings are disturbing." Mr. Harrison dismissed him with an impatient gesture. Locked in his office, he devoured the contents of the report page by page. The truth was there, documented with meticulous precision. For years, letters, phone calls, and attempts to contact the woman were systematically blocked by his own trusted assistant, following a protocol of protection against emotional distractions that he himself had established at the beginning of his rise. She had tried to inform him about the pregnancy, tried several times, and when the girl was born, she tried again. All attempts intercepted by those he paid to protect his peace of mind. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. It wasn't just his choice for ambition that had created this abyss. It was a whole system he had built around himself to isolate himself from any human vulnerability. A system so efficient that not even the news that he would be a father managed to penetrate it. With trembling hands, he continued reading. The woman, after years of fruitless attempts, had accepted her defeat. She dedicated herself entirely to her daughter, working in precarious jobs, facing increasing difficulties. The report included surveillance photos, the mother and daughter in various moments over the years. The resemblance between the girl and him was undeniable. The same features, the same determined expression. The last page contained the transcript of an interview with the doctor who had certified the woman's death. Severe pneumonia, aggravated by malnutrition and exhaustion. Treatable if diagnosed in time, treatable if there had been resources. Mr. Harrison let the papers fall to the floor. His breathing became irregular. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to feel the overwhelming weight of his choices and absences. The office door opened slowly. The girl entered, holding her worn teddy bear. "You're crying," she observed, approaching with hesitant steps. He hadn't even realized the tears that were now running freely down his face. He tried to wipe them away quickly, embarrassed by this display of weakness. "Sometimes adults cry too," he murmured, not knowing how to explain his emotions. The girl nodded seriously. "Mom cried sometimes when she thought I was asleep." Those simple words broke something inside him. A sob escaped his throat. 6 years of life unlived, of denied fatherhood, of lost moments that could never be recovered. "I didn't know about you," he confessed, his voice choked. "I swear I didn't know." The girl looked at the leaves scattered on the floor. Her gaze lingered on one of the photographs. Herself, years younger, in her mother's arms. "Mom said that some truths stay hidden because people build very high walls," she said, picking up the photograph carefully. "But the truth always finds a way to get through." At that moment, as if the universe wanted to underline her words, the phone rang. It was the lab that had carried out the second DNA test, the official one. The result, positive, without a doubt. Father and daughter connected by an undeniable genetic link. But the real bond, the one that really mattered, was beginning to form there, in that office, between belated tears and revealed truths. A bond that transcended DNA, guilt, regret. A bond made of mutual recognition of two souls that, despite everything, belonged to each other. "Were you angry when you found out about me?" he asked, finally finding the courage for the question that tormented him. The girl reflected for a moment with that peculiar depth that disconcerted him. "Not angry, just sad. Sad that you never saw Mom really smile." And it was that answer, so simple and so devastating, that finally demolished the walls that Mr. Harrison had built around his heart. The truth, for so long denied, repressed, ignored, had finally found a way to get through. The truth that, in his obsessive pursuit of success, he had lost the only things that could give meaning to all his achievements. In that moment, hugging his daughter for the first time, he understood that true power was not in possessing, controlling, or dominating, but in loving, protecting, and belonging. The news of the official DNA test spread like wildfire through the corporate corridors. Mr. Harrison, contrary to all the recommendations of his advisors, publicly announced the acknowledgement of paternity. A press conference was convened, where he, for the first time, showed himself vulnerable before the cameras. Without his usual impassive countenance, he spoke about regrets, second chances, and responsibilities. "I don't seek sympathy or approval," he declared, as blinding flashes shot in his direction. "I only publicly commit to my daughter, whom, due to circumstances I deeply regret, I couldn't meet before." The media reaction was divided. Some outlets exalted the redemption of the ice tycoon. Others questioned the opportunism of the situation, insinuating personal marketing strategies. The company's stock, which had plummeted with the initial scandal, began to recover slowly. The public loved a redemption story. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, a storm was brewing. The vice president of the corporation, an ambitious man who had been waiting for years for the opportunity to take control, saw the situation as the perfect chance to orchestrate a coup. In closed meetings with key members of the board, he raised concerns about Mr. Harrison's emotional stability and the impact of his impulsive personal decisions on the future of the company. He cancelled $3 billion deals to spend. "Time with the girl," he argued with false concern. "He is compromising decades of work for sudden sentimentality. It is our duty as a board to protect the shareholders." Unaware of these movements, Mr. Harrison dedicated himself to establishing a routine with his daughter. He enrolled her in a prestigious school, hired tutors to help her catch up on lost time, bought her books, toys, clothes. He tried to compensate for 6 years of absence with material gifts, still uncertain about how to offer what she really needed: presence, attention, love. The adaptation was not easy for either of them. The girl, accustomed to extreme simplicity, felt out of place in the universe of opulence. The employees of the penthouse themselves didn't know how to treat her, sometimes with excessive formality, sometimes with infantilizing condescension. Mr. Harrison, in turn, oscillated between moments of genuine connection and relapses into his distant behavior, especially when company matters demanded his attention. On a particularly difficult afternoon, after a tense meeting with worried investors, he returned to the penthouse, finding his daughter sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by all the expensive toys that remained untouched in their packaging. She had taken out of the plastic bag her old teddy bear, the only toy with which she really interacted. "Don't you like the new things?" he asked, trying to hide his disappointment. The girl looked at the presents scattered on the floor. "They're pretty, but they're not mine." "Of course, they're yours. I bought them all for you." She shook her head, patient as someone explaining something obvious. "They don't know me. This one," she said, raising the worn teddy bear, "knows all my stories." Mr. Harrison sat down next to her, feeling suddenly inadequate. "And me? Will I get to know your stories someday?" Before she could answer, the intercom buzzed. His assistant, with a tense voice, announced the unexpected arrival of representatives from Child Protective Services, accompanied by court officers. An anonymous complaint questioned the legitimacy of his guardianship over the child, demanding an official investigation. Downstairs, waiting in the lobby, was also his vice president, sporting an expression of concern that barely disguised his satisfaction. The coup was beginning to materialize. The officers came up, formal and inflexible. They presented documents, asked questions, observed the environment. The luxurious penthouse, so impressive to most, was now scrutinized by critical eyes, searching for flaws, inadequacies for a child. The girl answered the questions with her customary calm, while Mr. Harrison felt control of the situation slipping through his fingers. "We will need a complete psychological evaluation," informed the social worker, making notes on her clipboard, "and a detailed investigation of the previous circumstances. There are serious accusations about possible maternal neglect and an unsanitary environment." "Neglect?" Mr. Harrison's voice trembled with indignation. "She died trying to support our daughter, working until she got sick while He stopped as he realized he was digging his own grave. Every word defending the mother was an accusation against himself. Where was he while she sacrificed her own health? What was he doing while she struggled to ensure her daughter had the bare minimum? "We understand your situation," intervened the vice president with false solidarity. "And we want to help. The company can provide the best legal support, the best specialists. In the meantime, perhaps it would be prudent for the girl to be in temporary state custody until everything is clarified." Panic overwhelmed Mr. Harrison. State custody meant losing the daughter he had barely found. It meant failing again, abandoning her as he had abandoned her mother. "No," he replied firmly. "My daughter stays with me." "That decision is not up to you," replied the court officer coldly. It was then that the small, clear voice of the girl cut through the tension in the room. "Can I talk?" All the adults turned to her, momentarily surprised. The social worker nodded, encouraging her with a professional smile. "Before, I lived in a box," she began, with the disconcerting simplicity that characterized her. "I didn't have toys or enough food. Mom worked a lot, but she was always sick. Now I have a big bed and food every day. And he," she pointed to Mr. Harrison, "is learning to be a father. He doesn't know how very well yet, but he's trying." The silence that followed her words was almost palpable. The social worker exchanged glances with her colleagues, visibly touched. "And do you feel safe here?" she asked gently. The girl looked at her father, then at her teddy bear, then again at the social worker. "Mom said that safety isn't a place. It's when people really care about you." That answer, so profound in its simplicity, disarmed even the most skeptical officers. The investigation would continue, procedures would be followed, but the atmosphere had changed completely. The child would not be removed, at least not at that moment. Later, when everyone had left, Mr. Harrison found his daughter on the balcony of the penthouse, watching the sunset that painted the sky red and gold. "Thank you," he said simply, "for your words in there." She continued contemplating the horizon. "I told the truth. I know." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I promise I will try harder to deserve to be your father." The girl did not respond, but her little hand sought his in a silent gesture that said more than any word. Together, they watched the night fall over the city. Father and daughter, united against the forces that tried to separate them, forces that, they did not yet know, were only beginning to mobilize. A week after the visit from Child Protective Services, Mr. Harrison received an urgent summons from the board of directors. Upon arriving at the boardroom, he found somber faces and documents scattered on the mahogany table. His vice president, positioned strategically at the opposite head, had assumed an almost presidential posture. "We tried to protect you from this," he began with false concern, sliding a folder across the table, "but the situation has become unsustainable." Inside the folder, a complete dossier on the girl's mother, her past, her financial difficulties, periods of unemployment, precarious addresses, all presented in a way to construct the narrative of an unstable, incapable, irresponsible woman. The opposite of the dedicated person who had sacrificed her own life for her daughter. "It's already circulating in the press," informed the director of communications, passing him tabloids with sensational headlines. The story of the opportunistic mother who abandoned the child to extort a billionaire. Mr. Harrison felt the blood boil in his veins. That's a blatant lie. She never asked for a cent. She died in misery while I lived in luxury, ignorant of the existence of my own daughter. "Public perception is what matters," countered the vice president with calculated coldness. "And the current perception puts at risk everything we've built. Stocks are down 12% since the official announcement of paternity. Contracts are being reviewed. International partners question your stability." The word hung in the air, laden with insinuations. Stability. The same argument used to question the girl's custody was now employed to question his leadership in the company. "What exactly is the purpose of this meeting?" he asked, maintaining his composure with visible effort. The general counsel cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "The board suggests a temporary leave of absence to protect the company while you resolve your personal issues." It was a corporate coup, disguised as concern. Mr. Harrison recognized the tactics. He himself had used them countless times against adversaries in the past. The irony did not escape his perception. "And if I refuse?" The vice president smiled slightly. "We have the support of the majority of shareholders. It would be a drawn-out process that I would particularly like to avoid, for the interests of the company, and for the well-being of the child." The last word was pronounced with an intonation that made the implicit threat clear. Mr. Harrison stood up slowly, resting his hands on the table. For years, that room had been his uncontested domain. Now he felt like a stranger among his own peers. "You want to remove me from the company I built from scratch. You want to destroy the reputation of a woman who can no longer defend herself. And you're using my daughter as a pawn in this sordid game." His voice, normally calculated, trembled with indignation. "Do you really think you know me? That you know what I'm capable of?" A tense silence dominated the room. Many of those present had never witnessed such a display of emotion from him. "It's not about knowing you," the vice president finally replied. "It's about protecting the legacy you yourself have built." "My legacy?" Mr. Harrison laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even himself. "I spent decades building an empire while ignoring what really mattered. Don't you see? I was wrong. We're all wrong." Without waiting for a response, he headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned around one last time. "I won't resign, nor will I allow you to tarnish the memory of my daughter's mother. If you want war, you'll have war. But remember, you learned to play the game with me, never against me." Upon returning to the penthouse, he found the girl sitting at the kitchen table, trying to do her homework under the awkward supervision of the housekeeper. Seeing him, her perceptive eyes immediately detected his disturbance. Did something bad happen? Mr. Harrison hesitated. He had always treated children as fragile beings, incapable of understanding the complexities of the adult world. But his daughter was not an ordinary child. She deserved the truth, however difficult it might be. "Yes," he admitted, sitting down next to her. "People are saying bad things about your mother and trying to push me out of the company." The girl absorbed the information calmly, as if processing every implication. "Why don't they like Mom? They didn't even know her. Because it's easier to attack someone who can't defend themselves. And because..." He took a deep breath. "Because they want to get to me through her, through you. And does that hurt?" The question, so simple and so profound, caught him off guard. "Yes," he confessed. "A lot." The girl nodded, as if confirming something she already suspected. "Mom said that pain teaches important things. If it didn't hurt, you wouldn't learn." Another lesson, another wisdom transmitted by that woman he had abandoned, but who had never stopped teaching values to their daughter. Values that he, in his obsession with power and money, had long forgotten. "I need to defend your mother's memory," he said with renewed determination. "And I need to fight for my company, but..." He hesitated, confronting the fear that grew inside him. This could get ugly. People might say bad things, take pictures, ask difficult questions. Like, when Child Protective Services came? Worse. There was no way to soften the truth. They might try to separate us. The girl was silent for a long moment, playing distractedly with the pencil between her small fingers. Finally, she looked at him with surprising determination. "Then we have to fight together." Those 4 simple words provoked a revolution inside him. "Together," he repeated, feeling the weight and the promise contained in that word. That night, while his daughter slept, Mr. Harrison did something he never imagined he would do. Sitting in his penthouse office, he began rummaging through old boxes of personal documents. He found letters, photographs, memories of a time when money didn't command every decision he made. Among them, especially valuable finds, records from the time he met his daughter's mother, evidence of the genuine relationship they had, evidence that refuted the slanders that were beginning to circulate. In parallel, he launched an investigation into his vice president. If he had learned anything in decades of ruthless business, it was that everyone had secrets, and secrets were powerful weapons in the right hands. But while he worked methodically gathering ammunition for the battle that was approaching, a revelation hit him with unexpected force. For the first time in years, he wasn't fighting for money, power, or control. He was fighting for something infinitely more valuable: the right to be a father, to protect the legacy of the woman he had loved, to build a future where his daughter could grow without the shadow of slander and lies. He was fighting, finally, for what really mattered. The extraordinary general meeting of shareholders was convened for a rainy Friday. The grand hall of the corporate building overflowed with tense executives, worried investors, and journalists eager for scandals. At the head table, the vice president and his allies waited with calculated confidence, convinced of imminent victory. When Mr. Harrison entered, everyone expected to see him alone, defeated, perhaps even humiliated. Instead, he arrived accompanied, not only by his lawyers, but by a small entourage of simple people, workers from the neighborhood where his daughter had lived. And surprisingly, by the girl herself, holding hands with an elderly lady who many recognized as the neighbor who had appeared in recent reports. A murmur of astonishment ran through the hall. Cameras flashed frantically, capturing the unusual. Seen, the vice president paled visibly. "I appreciate everyone's presence," Mr. Harrison began, his calm voice echoing through the loudspeakers. "We are here to discuss the future of this company. But first, we need to correct some untruths that have been disseminated recently." With a gesture, he signaled to project on the giant screen behind him not financial graphs or performance spreadsheets, but photographs. Images of his daughter's mother over the years, working honestly, taking care of the child, fighting against increasingly adverse circumstances. "This is the woman some have tried to slander," he declared, with contained emotion. "A woman who, even abandoned by me, never used our daughter as an instrument of blackmail or revenge, who never demanded a cent, even when she struggled to survive, who preferred to die working rather than compromise her principles." The photographs continued. Payment receipts, employment records, medical certificates, all documenting the Life of struggle and dignity of the one who had been silently defamed. Now, he continued, abruptly changing his tone, let's talk about corporate principles. The screen changed to internal documents, memos, emails, records of secret meetings. Meticulously compiled evidence of how his vice president had orchestrated not only the defamation campaign, but also manipulated financial data to exaggerate the negative impact of the situation on the company's stock. The hall fell into absolute silence as the evidence accumulated. Misuse of corporate funds, parallel negotiations with competitors, detailed plans to take control not only of the company, but also of other companies in the group. This isn't about my personal life, Mr. Harrison concluded, staring directly at his stunned opponent. It's about integrity, about the fundamental values that should guide not only our private lives, but also our business decisions. He then turned to the shareholders. You have every right to question my leadership. In fact, I have questioned it myself recently. I have made serious mistakes, the biggest of which was allowing my obsession with success to blind me to what truly matters. But never, in all these years, have I betrayed the ethical principles of this company or placed my personal interests above the collective good. The vice president tried to intervene, but his voice was drowned out by the growing murmurs of the assembly. The tide had turned. The exposed documents were too devastating to be ignored or explained away. It was then that something happened that no one could predict. The girl let go of the elderly lady's hand and walked slowly to the microphone. Too small to reach it, she was gently lifted by her father. The entire hall held its breath. I didn't come here to get a rich dad, she said, with a clear and firm voice that echoed through the silent environment. I came for him to remember that he still has a heart. The simplicity of those words, the purity of the intention behind them, provoked a visceral impact on those present. Executives hardened by decades of ruthless negotiations found themselves suddenly confronted with an elementary truth they had long forgotten. Beyond the numbers, contracts, and stocks, there were people, lives, feelings. My mum never spoke badly of him, continued the girl, looking directly at the camera that transmitted the assembly to international shareholders. Even when she was very sick, she said that holding on to anger only makes you sick too. I don't want anyone to get sick because of anger. When she stepped down from the podium, a long silence dominated the hall, broken finally by something surprising. Applause, initially sparse, then growing, until they transformed into a spontaneous ovation that no one could have foreseen or orchestrated. The vote that followed was almost a formality. The vice president and his allies were removed pending a formal investigation for misconduct. Mr. Harrison was kept in the presidency, not out of fear or manipulation, as had happened so many times in the past, but out of a newfound confidence in his ability to lead with humanity. Later, as they left the building under the incessant flashes of photographers, the girl looked at the sky, where the rain had finally stopped, giving way to a timid rainbow. Mom said that after the storm, the sun always comes out, she commented, with that peculiar wisdom that never ceased to surprise him. Your mother was right, he replied, squeezing her small hand gently. About so many things. That night, the news didn't talk about scandals or corporate coups. It talked about redemption, about second chances, about how a child who never cried had taught a powerful millionaire the greatest lesson of all, that true wealth is not measured in money, but in human bonds, in courage, and in truth. Spring arrived, bringing with it renewal. The garden on the penthouse, once a decorative space rarely visited, had transformed into a small paradise of colors and life. The girl, kneeling on the ground, planted sunflower seeds under the watchful eye of her father. Mom said that sunflowers always look for the light, she explained, carefully placing the seeds in the rich soil. Even on cloudy days, they know where the sun is. Mr. Harrison, although still called that by the press, was now seen very differently, smiled, helping her cover the seeds with soil. His fingers, once accustomed only to signing documents and manipulating numbers, were now learning new movements, tying shoelaces, braiding hair, planting flowers. "Do you think your mother would approve of what we've done?" he asked, the insecurity still present in his voice when the subject was her, the woman he had loved, abandoned, and lost forever. The girl reflected for a moment with that serious expression that made her seem much older than her 6 years. "She always smiles in the photos I take of her from my pocket at night," she replied finally. "I think that means yes." The months since the shareholders' meeting had brought profound changes, not only in their personal lives, but throughout the corporate empire. Mr. Harrison had implemented transformations that shocked the business world. Generous parental leave, policies, daycare centers in workplaces, decent wages for all base employees, substantial investments in vulnerable communities. The project that gave him the most pride, however, was the foundation he had created in the name of his daughter's mother, an institution dedicated to providing medical and legal assistance to single mothers in vulnerable situations. The first care center had been inaugurated precisely in the neighborhood where she had lived her last days. On the day of the inauguration, the girl cut the symbolic ribbon. Without elaborate speeches, she had only said, "My mom would like to know that other mothers won't get sick without medicine." The simplicity of those words had more impact than any sophisticated rhetoric. The old, vacant lot where they had lived now housed a modern housing complex with green areas, a community library, and a professional training center. The former residents received apartments, never needing to leave the community they considered home. The cardboard boxes where the girl had slept had been replaced by real beds, real protection, real dignity. "You can't change the past," Mr. Harrison had explained to the journalists who questioned his motivations, "but we can transform the present so that the future is different." At school, the girl was progressing rapidly, overcoming the educational deficiencies of her early years. But what impressed her teachers the most was not her keen intelligence. It was her extraordinary empathy, her ability to see pain where others saw only problematic behavior, to offer comfort where others offered judgment. "She has a natural gift for understanding people," commented her teacher during a meeting, as if she could read their hearts. "She learned it from her mother," replied Mr. Harrison, with discreet but undeniable pride. "And now she's teaching me." At home, the routine had been established with surprising naturalness. Shared dinners at the table, instead of solitary meals in offices. Bedtime stories, replacing financial reports as the last reading of the night. Weekends in parks or museums, not in emergency meetings or international conferences. The impeccable suit was still present during work hours, but now shared space in the wardrobe with casual jeans and comfortable sneakers for Sunday walks. The cell phone, once an extension of his body, now often rested forgotten while games on the living room rug demanded total attention. That specific afternoon, while they finished planting the sunflowers, the intercom buzzed. The assistant announced the arrival of an official envelope, final documents from the adoption process, a legal formality to recognize what their hearts and DNA had already established long before. "What does this mean?" asked the girl, watching him sign the papers. With slightly trembling hands, "It means that now, for everyone, not just for us, we are officially father and daughter." She nodded, absorbing the information with the seriousness that characterized her moments of reflection. "But we already knew that, right?" "Yes," he smiled. "We already knew." Later, while preparing a simple dinner together, another newly discovered skill that he cultivated with surprising dedication. The girl asked the question she had been saving for weeks. "Can we visit where Mom is buried on Sunday?" The request caught him unprepared, not by the nature of the request, but by the sudden awareness that in all those months they had never done that together. He had visited the grave alone, bringing flowers and belated regrets. She had probably done the same, with her dignified silence and her inexplicable strength, but never as a family. "Of course," he replied, feeling the emotion tighten his throat, "we'll bring flowers, her favorites." "White daisies," completed the girl immediately. She said they were sincere, without fuss. Exactly like her. Sincere, authentic, without artifice. The woman he should have valued when he had the chance, whose love he had wasted in the name of ambition. The woman whose eyes now watched him, through the daughter they shared, not with accusation, but with renewed hope. On Sunday, under a clear sky, they stood before the simple headstone. At his insistence, her remains had been transferred from a common grave to a dignified burial plot. The girl carefully deposited the bouquet of white daisies, arranging them with meticulous precision. "Can she see us?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Mr. Harrison, a man who had built his life on measurable certainties, concrete numbers, and verifiable facts, found himself suddenly navigating metaphysical waters for which he had no map. But the answer came naturally, emerging not from reason, but from somewhere much deeper. "I think so. Not with her eyes, but with her heart. The same way you see her when you close your eyes at night." The girl reflected on this for a moment, then nodded, satisfied with the explanation. They remained there in shared silence, a small family reconfigured by pain, reunited by destiny, solidified by love, imperfect, belated, but genuine. On the way back home, as the sun began to set, on the city skyline, the girl made an observation that perfectly captured the journey they had traveled. "You know what's funny? Before I had a mom, but I didn't have a home. Now I have a home, but I don't have my mom anymore. And you had a huge house, but you were always alone." She paused, organizing her complex thoughts. "Now we have a house, and we have each other. And Mom is still with us too, but in a different way." Mr. Harrison, a man of few emotional words throughout his adult life, surprised himself by feeling silent tears streaming down his face. Not tears of sadness or regret, although there was room for both, but tears of gratitude for this second chance that he didn't deserve, for this extraordinary child who, against all odds, had found her way to him, for this life lesson that had arrived late, but not too late. "Thank you," he whispered, uncertain if he was speaking to the girl, to her mother, or to some greater force that had orchestrated this improbable reunion. The girl just held his hand a little tighter, as if to say that she understood. And perhaps she did, with that mysterious wisdom she seemed to carry from birth. Together, they walked towards the future, not a perfect future or one free of challenges, but an authentic future, built on painful truths transformed into solid foundations. A future where the value of things had finally been placed in the correct perspective, where true wealth had finally been recognized. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day.